Welcome to Life Stories. Have you ever felt like you were nothing more than a lifeline for others? Always giving, always fixing, and in return, they don't even see you. But what if one day you decide to stop? What if you walked away from everything you've ever known, leaving behind a family who only ever saw you as a means to an end? That's exactly what Ryan did. But in doing so, he found something he never expected, a freedom that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The question is, when you finally break free from the people who've held you down, what happens next? Let's dive into Ryan's story and see how far he's willing to go to reclaim himself. Ryan sat at the edge of the worn leather couch, the hum of conversations swirling around him. The room was loud, filled with voices he had known his entire life. His mother, Susan, stood in the kitchen stirring a pot, her back to him, as if trying to drown out the noise by focusing on the task at hand. Rachel, his sister, was on her phone, laughing with a friend. Emily, his niece, peeled away the plastic from the shiny new iPhone, her fingers moving with the precision of a child who had already learned the art of entitlement. "Thanks for the phone, Uncle Ryan," Emily chirped, already more interested in the screen than in the man who had just gifted it to her. Ryan forced a smile, nodding along with the sounds of appreciation and lighthearted laughter that filled the room. The words of his sister echoed in his ears like a sick joke. "Mom says, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The words stung more than he let on, though it wasn't the first time they had been said. They had come from his sister before, in moments when the pressure of family expectations had been too much for her to hide. But this time, the weight of it was different. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest, a familiar burn creeping up his throat. He had spent years trying to be the dependable one, the one who made sure the bills were paid, the one who kept the house from falling apart. And in return, he was ridiculed. He wasn't just the scapegoat, he was a walking wallet, a lifeline for a family that would rather take than give. His father, Greg, sat in his favorite armchair, his feet propped up on the ottoman, beer in hand. He chuckled at Emily's words, not a hint of concern in his eyes. "Well, she's not wrong," he said with a sneer. "You're too soft, Ryan. She's got a point." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had always been the one to clean up their messes, the one to give without ever receiving anything in return. Now, as his family laughed at his expense, something inside him broke. It wasn't just hurt, it was anger. A deep, gnawing anger that had been building for years. In that moment, he made a choice. With 2 quick taps on his phone, Ryan canceled every subscription, every bill, every financial tie that he had been holding together for them. His credit cards, his payments, all of it, gone in an instant. The room around him seemed to blur, the laughter growing distant as the familiar faces morphed into strangers. They had no idea what he had just done. They wouldn't until it was too late. Ryan stood up, leaving the room without a word. His family didn't even notice. No one stopped him. They were too consumed with themselves, with their own small worlds, to care about his silence. As he walked down the hallway, the door to the house still wide open, he paused for just a moment to take in the scene. It was the last time he would ever see it. His family, his past, his old life. He didn't go home. He didn't go anywhere familiar. Instead, he went straight to his apartment in Brooklyn, a small, modest studio that smelled faintly of fresh paint and stale coffee. He packed a bag with just the essentials: clothes, toiletries, nothing else. But the black backpack he found tucked in the back of his closet, nearly forgotten, had a different purpose now. It was a symbol of his escape, of the life he was leaving behind. He filled it, not with his things, but with proof. Every bill he had ever paid for them, every sacrifice he had made. They would find it, and they would understand just how far he had gone. Ryan returned to the house, slipping in unnoticed as the chaos continued. He left the backpack by the stairs, and then he vanished. Completely. The house would be empty before they even realized he was gone. The next morning, as Ryan lay in his apartment, he heard the sound of pounding on the door, the familiar, frantic knocks. It was his father, Greg. Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pounding stopped, replaced by angry footsteps. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Susan. How could you do this to your own family? Ryan didn't reply. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, the weight of their desperation echoing in his chest. His father's voice came next, laced with fury and something darker, fear. You think you're better than us? You think you can just disappear? Ryan closed his eyes, letting the silence wash over him. He had no intention of going back, no matter how they begged, no matter how much they tried to manipulate him. Later that day, a message from Rachel came through. It was venomous, filled with anger and accusations. You're a coward. You think you can just leave us to deal with our own mess? Ryan didn't respond. The truth was, for the first time in his life, he felt nothing but relief. What do you think? Can someone truly free themselves from their past without looking back? How far would you go to sever ties with a toxic family, and what would it cost you? But even as he embraced his new life, Ryan knew this wasn't the end. His family wouldn't give up so easily, and soon they would come looking for him, demanding answers, begging him to come back. But the truth was, they didn't want him. They wanted control. And Ryan was done being their lifeline. The next part of his journey was only just beginning. The storm hadn't hit yet, but Ryan was ready for it. And when it came, it would shake everything to its core. Ryan didn't expect the knock on the door, but when it came, it wasn't a surprise. It had been a week since he'd cut ties, since he'd walked away from everything he had known. The days had blurred into one another, quiet, peaceful, but with an edge of something gnawing at him, something he couldn't shake. He had expected the calls, the messages, the desperate attempts at reaching him. What he hadn't expected was the visitor at his door. It was Rachel. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from tears that she'd clearly fought to hold back. She wasn't the same Rachel who'd mocked him at that party, wasn't the same Rachel who'd smiled like she won when he crumbled under their weight. This Rachel was different. The one who had learned that life without Ryan was just as hollow as he had always felt. He didn't say a word as he opened the door, didn't even gesture for her to come inside. There was nothing to say. Not yet. Her voice cracked when she spoke. You've really done it this time, haven't you? She wiped at her eyes, avoiding his gaze. We're falling apart, Ryan. You're the glue that held this family together. You can't just leave. Ryan stood silent, letting the words hang in the air. He'd heard them before, many times, each one more hollow than the last. But now, hearing them from Rachel, there was a tremor in her voice, an honesty he hadn't expected. Do you really think that's why I stayed all these years? Ryan asked, his voice cold but not unkind. Because I'm some kind of glue? His gaze sharpened. You think I wasn't falling apart too? Rachel flinched, her eyes darting away. There was no answer to that. She knew the truth, but she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to face the fact that Ryan had been the one holding them all up, while they had been the ones pulling him down. She had never seen it, not until it was too late. I'm sorry, okay? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I didn't realize how much you were doing for all of us. She stopped, her face reddening as she fought for composure. Please, come back. Mom, she's falling apart. Dad, you saw how he reacted. It's not the same without you. Ryan's heart wrenched at the words, but he didn't let it show. He couldn't. Not anymore. He had given them everything. Everything he had, everything he was. And in the end, it had never been enough. You don't get it, Rachel, he said, his voice quieter now. I was never enough. You all made sure of that. And I let you. I thought if I kept doing more, maybe you'd finally see me. But you didn't. And now, I'm done. His eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment she saw the man he had become, strong, unshakable, and finally free. You want me back? You want me to fix things again? Then fix yourselves first. Rachel's breath hitched, and she stepped back, her face crumpling. You're so cold. You don't care anymore, do you? You don't care about the family, about us. Ryan's chest tightened, but his resolve was firm. He had lived his whole life trying to be everything for everyone else. He couldn't keep doing that. Not anymore. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it and cursed under her breath, her face twisting with frustration. I have to go, she said, her voice distant. Mom wants me back. They need me. Ryan nodded, stepping back and closing the door softly. As the sound of her footsteps retreated down the hallway, something twisted inside him. But before he could think too much about it, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The name on the screen sent a chill down his spine. Greg. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the screen, but then he swiped to answer. Ryan. His father's voice came through, rough and strained. We need to talk. You think you've won? You think you can just walk away and leave us to burn? There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, Ryan almost thought his father had hung up. But then, in a voice Ryan barely recognized, Greg spoke again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but your mom, she's not well. You can't just leave her like this. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Susan. She was the one who had always been there, the one who had raised him, even if it hadn't always been in the way he needed. His mind flashed to the image of her standing in the kitchen, stirring something in silence, pretending not to hear the laughter at his expense. It wasn't the first time she'd used him. Not by a long shot. But this felt different. She's your mother, Ryan, Greg said, his voice softer now. Come back. For her. The plea in his father's voice did something Ryan hadn't expected. It cracked through the walls he had built around himself. For a moment, he was back in that house, back in the place where he had once been so desperate to please, so desperate to matter. But that was the past that was long gone. The man he was now could never return to the one he had been. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and then hung up. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone you thought you couldn't live without? How did it feel to make that choice? Ryan thought he had escaped his past, but will his family's desperation pull him back in? Or has he truly moved on for good? Find out in the next chapter, where the consequences of his freedom begin to unfold. Ryan walked through the city streets, the familiar hum of New York surrounding him like a blanket. The wind rustled the autumn leaves, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he breathed deeply. The weight of his past, of his family's demands, no longer clung to him like a shadow. It was as if the city had swallowed him whole and allowed him to breathe again. The constant pinging of his phone had stopped. The messages had stopped coming. The calls, the desperate pleas, everything had gone silent. For days, it had felt like he was on the edge of a cliff, waiting for someone to pull him back. But now the silence was a comfort, a peace that he had never known. The guilt he had carried for years, the suffocating weight of his family's expectations, was finally gone. But something had shifted within him, something he hadn't anticipated. He hadn't realized how much he had missed them. It wasn't the financial burden. It wasn't the obligation to be the one who fixed everything. It wasn't even the constant demand for his time. No, it was the absence of their presence that gnawed at him, the emptiness left behind when he had walked away. It was Rachel's face, tear-streaked and desperate, that lingered in his mind. His mother, Susan, silently watching him with a quiet sadness that spoke volumes. His father, Greg, always hiding behind his anger, but in that final phone call, Ryan had heard something else. Fear. Fear that he might truly be lost to them forever. Ryan turned down a quiet side street, one he had passed 1,000 times before. His feet carried him to the corner cafe, the one where he and Rachel used to meet for coffee on lazy Sunday mornings. It was a small, cozy place, warm, inviting, with the scent of fresh pastries and coffee in the air. He hadn't been there in months. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled softly, and the barista greeted him with a smile. But Ryan barely noticed. He was looking at the empty corner booth, the place where they had sat together, laughing, arguing, planning, dreaming, the place where, for a brief moment, he had felt like he belonged. He ordered his usual black coffee and sat at the table, his fingers drumming lightly on the wood. He had no intention of returning to the life he had left behind, no desire to fall back into the chaos that had consumed him for so long. But as he sat there, a thought struck him, a thought that caused his chest to tighten. What if this is what I've been running from all this time? Was it really the money, the constant struggle to hold everything together? Or was it the love that had always been buried beneath the resentment, the love that he had been too afraid to acknowledge, too afraid to accept? The truth was, he hadn't just run from them. He had run from himself, from the person he had become in their shadow, the person who had allowed them to drain him emotionally and physically until there was nothing left but an empty shell. He hadn't realized that until now. As Ryan sat lost in thought, the door to the cafe opened, and he didn't have to look up to know who had walked in. The sound of heels clicking against the floor was unmistakable. Rachel. Her eyes were red, her hair messy, as though she hadn't slept in days. When she saw him sitting at the table, her face softened, and she hesitated, as if unsure whether to approach him. But then she walked over, her steps slow, deliberate. "I didn't think you'd come back here," she said softly, standing by the table, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and something else, something that sounded like hope. Ryan looked at her, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions. He had spent so long pushing away the parts of himself that had cared for them, the parts that still cared, that he had forgotten what it felt like to want to be part of something again. "You didn't think I'd come back, but here I am," Ryan replied, his voice low, "and I don't know what that means yet." Rachel didn't sit down. She just stood there, looking at him as if searching for something, some sign that he wasn't the same person who had left, that he still had a place in this world, in their world. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking, "for everything. I didn't understand. I didn't see how much you were carrying. I didn't see you." Ryan swallowed hard, his throat tight. "You don't need to apologize, Rachel. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who walked away. But I had to. I had to leave to figure out who I was without all of you, without the weight of your expectations, and I'm still figuring it out." She nodded slowly, her lips trembling as she wiped away the tears threatening to fall. "I get that," she whispered. "I understand. But I miss you. We all do. And maybe we didn't see it before, but we need you, Ryan. We need you more than we realized." Ryan's heart twisted in his chest. He wanted to say something, to tell her everything he had been holding inside. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood up, pushing the chair back with a creak. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Ryan said quietly, "I'll come back, Rachel. Not today. Not yet. But soon." Rachel's face lit up with a smile that felt like the first real one he had seen in years. She reached out, pulling him into a hug, one that felt different this time. Not desperate, but hopeful. As they pulled away, Ryan felt something shift within him. Something lighter. He wasn't sure what it was, but for the first time, he didn't feel the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him. It was as if, in that moment, he had reclaimed a part of himself he had lost along the way. But as he walked out of the cafe with Rachel by his side, the sound of a familiar voice caught his attention. It was his father, Greg. Standing across the street, staring at him, eyes wide with something between anger and relief. And for a brief moment, Ryan's chest tightened again, as if the past was reaching out to him, trying to pull him back. But he didn't stop. He kept walking, with Rachel beside him, the city around them alive with possibility. How do you feel about Ryan's decision to confront his past and the possibility of reconnecting with his family? If you enjoyed the story, leave a 100 in the comments. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to share this story with your friends. Thank you for watching Life Stories.